Hi guys, I'm Woodcraft Hamster, and I thought I'd finish up my series today about carving a bowl from the end grain. Now this particular bowl, if you've seen my other videos, has been drying out for some time. It's been about 3 to 4 weeks in my workshop, and I'm reasonably sure this is now dry enough for final sanding and finishing. A little tip that I picked up a while ago was that if you're a little bit unsure as to whether it's fully dried out, especially when you've got a piece of wood like this where, although you may have some nice sort of fairly thin walls of the bowl, the base is quite thick. What you don't want to do is obviously oil it or finish it, whether it's oil, beeswax, whatever, and trap moisture in there, because what will happen is it will rot from the inside out. Now the trick that I picked up, and hopefully you can see here, is I gave this a sanding a couple of days ago. Just a very light sanding with some fine grit sandpaper, and you should be able to see here, hopefully it's picking up well enough on the camera, is that the where I've sanded, you can still see the sort of the sanding marks, if you like. Same on the base, did the same thing there as well, and it looks exactly the same now as it did when I sanded it, and that is a very good indication that that the bowl is now dry. What would normally happen if you were to sand a piece of wood that was still slightly damp inside? Give it kind of like 6 hours, 12 hours, something like that. A couple of days, you know, from my side is certainly long enough. And if there is any moisture in there that's still trying to escape, you will see that sort of darkening up some of the areas where you've sanded it. So again, just another little trick that may help if you're making something similar. Unfortunately, we have still got a couple of cracks. Again, I don't know if you'll see these properly here. There's a crack running here, there's another one running here. And internally in the bowl, now that I've sanded it, it's actually made it a lot more difficult to see, which is good, which is what we want. But basically you may just be able to see kind of in here, and again, the more I sand this, and again, when we're doing the finishing, when I put the wax and the oil in there, that will again kind of partly fill those cracks. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time now just doing a final sand of this bowl. I'm going to leave the outside with this tool finished, because I've grown quite accustomed to that and I quite like it. So I'm just going to sand down the inside of the bowl, and again, as usual, I'm going to work down through the grits. I've got my 80 grit, I've got my 120, my 220 and my 320. And again, I'm not going to bore you guys doing all of that on camera. So what I'll do, I'll come back when we're pretty much there, and I'll show you how we're getting on. Right then guys, so we're now done. I have finished the final sanding. I've worked my way through all the grits. Hopefully you can see the bowl there is nice and smooth. The only unfortunate side effect is just here. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up. The crack has reappeared slightly. That will happen when you're sanding it down to a fine grit. But what I'm now going to do is just move on to the very final finishing, and there's two things I want to do on this bowl. I'm going to give the whole thing a coating of an oil and beeswax finish that I make myself. I will do a video about that at some point, just so you can see how I make it. But before I do that, I'm going to give the inside of the bowl just a quick coating of walnut oil. The reason for that is the inside of the bowl is the bit that gets used the most. It's where you've got spoons and things going in, it's where you've got liquids going in. I just want to give it a little bit more protection. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to nip into the house very quickly. I'm going to pop this in the oven on a low heat for 5 to 10 minutes, just so it's warm to the touch. I'm then going to put some walnut oil in. I'm going to smooth it around the bowl. As soon as that's done, I'll bring it back out here. I will bring the oil and beeswax finish with me, and I'll show you how I apply it, and then we should be done. Right guys, well, I've now oiled the inside of the bowl. Hopefully you can sort of see from there is quite a stark colour difference between the inside and the outside, which is pretty much what I was going for. Unfortunately, through heating it in the oven, I probably don't even need to point this out. You may be able to see, but I will point to it just in case. Just there, the crack has developed significantly, which basically means there is some moisture left in this, and obviously the moisture trying to escape when it turns into steam has caused the crack to split further. Now that in itself is not too much of a problem. Unfortunately, we have a much bigger issue at the moment, and because there's still moisture in there, this has happened. Now obviously you can see, without me pointing at anything, there's a number of cracks in the base of this bowl. Again, none of them go all the way through, so I'm still sort of very quietly optimistic that this may still be salvageable. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to crack on and I'm going to put my beeswax finish on the inside of the bowl. I'm then going to leave this for at least another week. These cracks will kind of help us in a way, as much as I don't want them to be there. They have now opened up the base of the bowl, the thickest part, which should help some of that moisture to escape. It's not ideal by any means, but you know, if it's at all possible, I'm going to try and salvage this. So what I was going to show you, I've got a very small saucepan here, a little cotton bottom pan, and it's what I use for sort of melting things down when I'm making sort of my finishes and things. And what I've got here is some almond oil and beeswax, which I've melted together. It's not quite a paste, it's still sort of fairly hard, and you can either use a cloth and kind of just really rub on this to get some off onto the cloth and then try and pour it on, or sort of rub it on, should I say, sort of like this. What I'm going to do is just break off some small pieces of this. You can see it's going all over my hands already. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to heat this up with my stove and then apply it to the bowl. So what I'll do, guys, I'm going to move the camera just a little bit closer in so you can get a much better idea of what it is I'm doing. We'll finish off the inside of this bowl, and rather than doing a complete separate video, I won't post this video just yet. I'll wait until this has dried out a bit more. I'll finish this off, and hopefully we should be able to sort of finish the entirety of this bowl in one video. Okay guys, so here's my basic setup. I've got some of this oil and beeswax finish in a pan. I've got my my little camping stove going, and all I'm going to do is just warm this up until it turns into a liquid. Certainly don't need to be too hot, don't need to boil it or anything like that. In fact, really it's not particularly safe to get it too hot anyway, because obviously oil and wax are both flammable. But all you want to do is just literally melt this down until it's just turned into a liquid form. Doesn't take long at all, to be perfectly honest. And then I'm just going to use a clean rag. See if you can see that there. So basically most of it's now turned into a liquid, the rest of it will continue just through the heat of the pan to melt. And I've got two cloths here. One is a buffing cloth, the other is the one that I normally use for applying the beeswax. You may be able to see on there, you know, there's quite a bit of residue on here. And to be honest, you know, if I take a small section here, you know, I can apply that residue. But what I prefer to do is, as I say, I'll use this in the liquid form. Just gives it a little bit more of a nicer consistency. And again, you're almost just kind of painting it on. You do need to rub it in, and the benefit that this will do, as well as just generally protecting the bowl, is it's just now filled in. Hopefully you can see there, the crack that's just here has now been completely filled in with the wax. So that will again create a waterproof seal, which, especially if you've got a crack like this, is really useful. All I'm going to do is just completely coat the inside of the bowl. You don't want to put this on too thickly. The reason being is that you do need to buff it out afterwards, and the thicker you put it on, the more work you're going to have buffing it back off to get rid of that sort of sticky residue. Get a little bit around the rim of the bowl as well. And there we go. I mean, I'm not sure if you can see that, guys. Got a really nice sort of shine on it now. What you may not be able to see is all of the wipe marks. Let me see if I can get that a bit closer up. Maybe you will be able to see it on the camera there. But basically that beeswax is now sort of just very slowly sort of sinking into the wood along with the oil finish. Again, I'm really pleased with, as I said earlier, the colour change. So obviously the inside of the bowl is a lot darker than the outside. When I put this beeswax finish on the outside, it will darken down, and it will sort of start to match this a little bit more, but it should stay ever so slightly lighter. which is exactly what I want. But now all I'm going to do is just take this cloth and just very sort of quickly just buff out the excess of this beeswax. And really all this is doing is just removing that sort of top layer of beeswax, sort of the excess that's on there that's not required. And what you may be able to see, hopefully it's picking up on this rag okay, this was a clean rag before, now all of this area here is now covered in beeswax, and that's just where it's removing the stuff that we don't want to remain in the bowl. Again, just tidy up around the rim there. And again, I can now run my fingers over this bowl. There's no stickiness, there's no residue on there anymore. And again, I like to do this after I've finished applying this anyway, just to make sure that there aren't any patches, because you will feel very easily with your fingers whether there's a sticky patch that you've missed. And again, you can put 2, 3, 4 coats of this on. You can put as much or as little as you like. What I'll normally do, something like this, I'll stick with one coat for the time being, give it a little bit of time, wait for the wood to sort of balance itself out again, temperature changes, things like that, and then maybe put another coat on. But again, I'm really pleased with this. It's a real shame that this has split. As I say, we've salvaged the split in here. Now again, I can run my finger over this and you can't feel any difference between the wood as your finger goes over the split, which is what we want. What you don't want to be able to do is kind of catch it with your finger or thumbnail there. So that's worked really well. And again, underneath, I mean, you can see the moisture that's in here. And unfortunately, that was me just being a little bit over eager. I thought that it had fully dried out and it hadn't, and this is one of the risks you get with things like this, especially if you're like me and you kind of lose patience with it a little bit and go, oh, well, we'll just give it a try. So again, I'm going to leave this now that this is sealed, I'm going to leave this upside down like so. Hopefully that any moisture will start seeping out of the top here, and it will dry out sort of naturally. And what I'll do, I'll cut back to this in probably a week or two's time, when this should then hopefully be completely dry, and I'll put the final oil and wax finish on here. Right then guys, so it's been a couple of weeks since I shot that last clip, and we've had a few more problems. As you can see, the bowl has still not dried out. It's taking much longer than I anticipated. The cracking hasn't got any worse, thankfully, but I'm playing it safe, and I'm just letting it dry out very slowly. I'm not doing anything to try and speed this process up for obvious reasons, but I did want to post this video now, just so you can see where we've got to and what I've done so far. And what I'll do, I'll come back in hopefully a couple of weeks, if not a little bit longer, however long it basically takes to dry out. But this is now just sitting in my workshop, as I said, and very slowly drying. I'm not going to sort of put it outdoors in the sunshine or anything like that, because I think it will make it crack even more. So hopefully, being in my sort of slightly cool workshop, it will dry out slowly enough. But anyway, that's where we are. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Any questions or comments in the box below, and I hope you'll all join me next time. Thanks guys.